Hello, everyone, and welcome to PopLife, a new TIR Presents show where we're going to take a deep, more fun dive into different aspects of pop culture, movies, and, of course, something I spent a long time doing, music. Sometimes I will be joined by my co-host and good friend, who some of you might remember from the recent Woodstock 99 episode, Pasquale, I always call him Pasquale Romero, who has a very storied history in music and the film industry as well. Don't forget, if you like what you're seeing or hearing, please hit like, subscribe, and that notification bell so you know whenever we go live. Like I always say on the main show, we're constantly adding new shows to the channel, so hit that bell so you can stay notified. Quickly, before I bring in our guest, I have to remind you guys that we are doing our first ever live show. Los Angeles, the Telegram Ballroom, in conjunction with Give Them an Argument and Left Reckoning, the trifecta of independent left media. Wherever you are hearing, seeing this show, there are links in the description. October 23rd, the Telegram Ballroom. Look forward to seeing you there. Now, for the guest of honor. Recently, I wrote an article for Sublation Magazine about Woodstock 99 in a tacit defense of nu metal. In an interview I did with Derrick Varn for VarnVlog, he and I took a deep dive down a 90s and 2000s rabbit hole and started talking not just nu metal, but metalcore as well. Kind of an edgy response to the commercial successes of nu metal, in my opinion. Today, I have the privilege to talk to one of my favorite vocalists of the late 90s and early 2000s genre, a mix of hardcore punk, but with the musical precision you're used to hearing in metal. Our guest, James Hart, was on the forefront of metalcore, and some say even didn't just inspire part of the sound, but also the fashion as well. Please welcome singer for 18 Visions, Mr. James Hart.
What's up? What's up? How's it going?
It's going all right, man. It's going all right. So I did do some studying beforehand. You may not be familiar with the main show that we do, This Is Revolution, which is more of a political and history podcast. So there's a lot of homework I have to do before anybody comes on the show. And I think people think when I'm doing something like this, it's just a laid back, I'm not going to take it very seriously, but oh no, I did my 18 Visions homework, because I'm not going to sit here and lie and say, I've been following you since the first release. I'm from 7 hours north of you in the San Francisco Bay Area. Different scenes. I think I'm a little older than you. I don't know your exact age. I'm 45. So I think,
Yeah. But I look like I've got 5. I look like I've got 5 on you.
You have hair, my friend. So yeah. Don't ever underestimate the power of hair. But I discovered your band watching, maybe it was the reboot of Headbangers Ball in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this video's like, this is cool. This band is pretty cool. And I remember going and getting, what was that? The 2002 record.
Would have been Vanity.
Vanity.
Yeah.
And then I really dug the follow-up to that, which was a little more poppy and accessible, Obsession. Actually, I was tour managing a band in 2008, and I was playing Obsession, and they were more like radio friendly, like Breaking Benjamin kind of hard rock, right? Big hooks, and I'm in there playing all the shit that they don't ever hear. And I remember putting in Yours, and everybody's ears perked up when I put in Obsession, and they really loved it to the point where they also became fans of Burn Halo. You know, so
Awesome.
which I dug as well. But I do want to know a little bit about your background. Now you are from Orange County, correct?
Got here when I was a kid, like 6, from the Chicago area.
Okay.
Grew up here. I'm pretty much from here. You know, like my roots are here, which we'll probably get to a little bit later. But yeah, I grew up in Huntington Beach in the like mid 90s or early mid 90s. So been here pretty much my whole life.
And what was that scene like? Like junior high and high school is a moment where you kind of get into your own as far as your music tastes. You're maybe breaking away from whenever your parents are playing a little bit and starting to, you know, like what you like. And we had a scene here in the Bay Area. Did you have something similar in Orange County?
Yeah. So my first exposure to like probably through a local station we had here called KNAC, which played like Alice in Chains and Pantera and Faith No More. You know, I did like some of the stuff in the 80s that was coming out. Obviously, Gun, Skid Row, but I was always kind of once I heard something heavier, more towards that. And then I was 12 with a guy, and still really good friends with him to this day. Into skateboarding, we played baseball together. His older brother was into skateboarding, exposed to I was exposed to even heavier music, like the first Tool, and then like Rage Against the Machine, that was just coming out. It was even like, I guess, more like punk rock stuff, No Effects, Minor Threat, Gorilla Biscuits, and that's kind of like pushed me even more into like the underground scene of music, because it was heavier, or it was grittier, or it just had like a different vibe being played on the radio. So freshman year of high school, listening to those bands and stuff like that, I kind of connected with some other new friends and do like punk and like metal and hardcore. Straight edge was, or like what hardcore was really, until I got into high school. It was one of my friends playing some stuff. I think it was like an Unbroken record, like I think it was Rich. I think it was like the Ritual record, and I was like, oh man, this is like really cool. I burned like a copy and would listen to that over and over. It just had this like angsty, like hardcore feel to it, but also like really metalish. I was just really kind of into, and that was, I guess, my first exposure to what I would consider metalcore. So it was heavier, something a little bit more extreme, and started going to shows, I think, when I was 14 or 15. And I just got
Chain Reaction, I'm assuming.
Chain Reaction. Yeah, Chain Reaction wasn't even a thought. I don't even think the shot either. Most of them were at this place in Fullerton called the Ice House for those that came through. I saw like Snapcase and Lifetime come through Snapcase's tours there. I saw like Outspoken was there, Unbroken, Mean Season, a bunch of like Orange County hardcore. I just really got sucked into what was going on, like the intensity the music, connection the bands had with like the crowd and the fans, and just how close, you know, there wasn't this like huge like barricade, there wasn't this like crazy production and all. It was just really raw, and so I was just felt like that was really kind of my zone. And I found that's really where I found it.
Interesting. Was the Showcase Theater too far from you to go to at that time?
No, it wasn't even running yet. I don't think that shows started going on there until '96, and that's when there's a lot of like more like, I think once all the hardcore and like punk tours and like death metal tours started going, and so we would all pile in a car and go out there. Yeah.
Wow, this is interesting. I mean, this is predating some of the venues that I know from my time going around.
Yeah, I think back then it was just like a show would just kind of pop up wherever and stick around for too long. Even in LA, there was a venue up there. Oh God, I think it was called the Alano Club or something. There was that didn't stay around forever either. And it was just bouncing around from venue to venue, willing to have like metal and hardcore.
Yeah. No, I remember it was just like, it was hard to find places that could have shows. Oh God, I played a place in Anaheim that maybe you guys played it, the world famous Doll Hut.
Oh yeah, I know where that is. Yeah, it was different. That was more. There was a lot of shows going on there, but that was a 21 and over. So
yeah,
really, you couldn't really get in there, unless maybe you were playing and then they kind of kick you. But I always stuck to the all ages venues.
I hear when I listen to your music, and maybe I'm wrong, but growing up in the 80s, my first entry into heavy stuff was, you know, the Motley Crues and the Van Halens. And I felt like I heard a little bit of that LA, just a little bit, maybe like the LA Guns, definitely the Guns N' Roses in some of your music. Was any of that ever an inspiration to what you guys were doing as well? Or I shouldn't say inspiration, influence.
I don't think, maybe a little bit with like the Motley Crue. Vocally for me, Guns N' Roses is like a Roses fan. And yeah, again, like I guess considered band, especially like a darker band at the time, they're definitely an influence, I think, on and what we like wanted to like present ourselves in the way we looked. Let's say starting maybe around like 2002, 2003, gravitated more towards that look. But musically, we were really like into like the 90s, like grunge and rock scene. Nirvana, I think, had a heavy influence on the music, influence on the music and the vocals. Same with Alice in Chains, and just kind of with that on the Vanity record, which you said was probably what you found first with, and the ball video for You Broke Like Glass. I think that would have been. And we really started kind of blending these like grunge, like rock with, and that's kind of how we started really kind of hone in on our sound.
Now, there is a debate we have on this, not even a debate. I try not to use the term grunge, but it just gets used too much, right? Like it is a signifier of a time and somewhat of a sound, but me personally have always felt that that's a media term, because for me, sonically, Nirvana doesn't sound like Alice in Chains. It doesn't sound like the Melvins. It doesn't sound like Tad. It doesn't really sound like Soundgarden. There's a through line. Like if I say hair metal to you, there's not just a look, but there's also a sonic sound, right?
Right. And grunge a general look than it is a sound, right?
Yeah,
They're like
that's how I've always felt about it.
Heavier, all kind of had the similar vibe to the way they looked, right? Yeah, that's
like, you know, does Pearl Jam really remind you of the Melvins, right? Like, it's just to me, it was like, oh, these are dudes from Seattle. Like that's what grunge meant. But I get what you're saying though, because those were very large records at the time. Another thing I was thinking about, actually, I was watching some interviews with you, and then I was watching some of your more recent performances that are on YouTube. And wherever you guys are listening or watching this show, there's going to be links in the description to all of 18 Visions social media channels, so you guys can see them live as well. And I wrote a piece a while back that got a little bit of traction about hardcore, and the sequel to that is actually going to talk more about the grunge years and pop punk and kind of a change in music after Kurt Cobain dies. And I also felt like when I first hit you up a few weeks ago to ask you to come on, there's this moment where, to me, metalcore also is a bit of a angrier reaction to the enormous success that pop punk was getting in the late 90s and early 2000s as well. It felt like everybody was on that silly nasally voiced train of mall rock. Is really what I felt. Did you guys feel like you were the antithesis of that kind of music when you were putting this stuff together? I mean, I'm sure you're not sitting in a room trying to be like, you know, Blink 182, but there was something about the music that comes out of your scene in particular to me that tries to put a dagger in that stuff.
Yeah, considering wrote, I would say 50% of all the music. Yeah, I don't think we were trying to go straight up against it. I think for us, I don't think we ever like did anything like intentional where we're like, hey, we need to because this stuff sucks. I think we were just so in our own zone and so into what we were on music and the bands that we liked that we just unapologetically kind of wanted to at the time, and it helped us and it hurt us. Different things. A lot of our older fans that had been into like Until the Ink Runs Out, even that was just like really, really dark and really heavy. They weren't super into what we were doing on Vanity, and then of course hanging around for Vanity, maybe Obsession was like a little bit too much for them. Maybe it was a little too poppy, or there's not enough breakdowns for them, and then we went into, and it was like just pretty much a straight up heavy rock record with like no screamy vocals, and I feel like everyone jumped ship, and I felt like we were we shot ourselves in the foot to a certain extent because we're right from record to record. It's you see a band like Killswitch Engage, God, and the type of like longevity they've had as bands, and it's because going out into left field, like trying crazy new things on an Lamb of God definitely experimented with some stuff and tried some things out that might have like bummed a few people. In the end, it was really, really, really well done, and they were who they were, and same, they would incorporate or add different. Wasn't so far from the last record, right, where we were just like completely bailing. I ideas and concepts like in the previous record, going into the next record saying like, hey, like we don't need 5-minute long songs anymore. A song together, which is what we're doing on Vanity. And I think a lot of that actually had to do with us being able to like do our own demos. Ken and Keith, our guitar players, started getting into Pro Tools a little bit, and we were able to do our own pre-production, really kind of see what felt good and trim out like different parts. And it wasn't like up in the practice studio and saying like, all right, I've got 3 parts. Does anybody else have a part? Cool, let's throw it here. I got another part, put it here. And like all of a sudden you're just, you're wrong and it doesn't make sense, but it's still cool. And you're singing vocals, and then 20 years later you play the songs, you're like, why the fuck did I do this? Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this question, and I don't know if this gets asked enough. Constantly people talk about selling out as if you tame a sound, now you've sold out, which I always have my own feelings about, because we mature as we get older, especially if you have children. There becomes a certain softness to one once you bring another life into this world. We can paint with many colors, right? But isn't it selling out to a certain point, though, if you guys did continue to do the same exact thing over and over again, a la Slayer or CDC?
Yeah. I mean, you make a fair point, yeah, I mean, how many of the same record can I take from the same band? I want something. I want an Alice in Chains record, but it to be a little bit different, And I'm okay with maybe not even liking every song on the record, but I just want, I want something different. I want something fresh from a band that I love, and I've been following, or maybe I got into them halfway back, and like got into the older catalog. I just want something that says we tried something new, we tried something different. I like Hatebreed, right? But I felt like, a lot of the songs to me had this, there was just this really, really great formula that worked, right? And onto it. But like, I don't know if I could listen to like a whole record like that after, Perseverance or something of the. I've always been so into music and different types of music that I want something fresh. I don't know if it's selling out if you're staying true to yourself and doing what you want because it makes you happy. Then I'm all for that. The artist in me likes the freedom of being an artist. Expand and try new things, and maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. It's experimented.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a huge Faith No More fan, and Bjork, and those are 2 artists, in my opinion, that do what they are 2 groups of people that do what they want to do. And they're never really bound by the confines of what people want. I mean, if Bjork wanted, she could keep, releasing her first 2 records, but everything, her catalog is just so vastly different, especially Faith No More. I got to know them. I lived in the music rehearsal space in Oakland where they had a rehearsal spot, and such a pleasure to get to know these cats that were so all over the board musically. It kind of gave me a certain amount of courage to just, hey, we're gonna do what we want to do, and if people dig it, great. If not, someone will, I guess. But
right.
You hope. I mean, right? Now you guys go from small local band, we all start as local band, right? To all of a sudden you get, not all of a sudden, it takes time, right? You get a major label deal with, was it Epic you guys signed with?
Yeah, Epic.
What was that transition like, going from smaller independent label where you probably get a little more freedom to having major label expectations? I remember getting the CD of Obsession. I remember opening it. You know, there's a great photo shoot. I'm sure you guys had top-notch photographers. I'm hoping you guys had top-notch photographers, and it wasn't your homie that, you know, took a class at the community college. But you have these nice photos, and then it says like you had these endorsement deals. It was like sponsored by Paul Frank. They were like clothing endorsement deals. I was like, wow, these guys must be doing all right. What was that transition like when a major label opens up their wallet a little bit and you guys actually have a bit of a budget?
Yeah, I mean, nice, because, you know, focus on like writing a record and recording a record while I was at home going to work. That was nice and something new and different. But to be honest with you, we only had one person, I guess maybe two, that had any sort of weight at Epic. Our A&R guy that had signed us, and the head of video, and they're really the only two that were fighting for us. You know, like you said, you lose some of that freedom. It was we made the record we wanted to make. Really, we loved all the songs. They're very, very different for what the band was and has always been, and what I love all those songs, and I love that record. But they didn't know what to do with it. They didn't really know how to like market or brand us. Rock record, and at the time, Avenged Sevenfold was doing really, really well, and they were for, you know, mainstream radio at the time. I mean, sure, there's Metallica and stuff, but for a new band out and do what they were doing, you know, we felt like a really like good opportunity for us to kind of like, you know, and you know, they picked the wrong single, and they tracks on the record that we really like didn't agree with down the road, but we had like a game plan. We knew what we wanted. We knew it was the right first single, especially for the fan base. You know, because your put drop. So this new song that everyone's hearing is the introduction to the new record. They chose, you know, a poppier rock track, which is a great for the time and place of what we were turned into, an absolute kind of mess right out of the gate with like radio and like you know the whole, you know, trying to get the radio stations behind it, and kind of a disaster. And they ended up flipping the script for us, tried to do right by us, but at the end of the day, they had spent more money than us, and you know, before we could get to like the really big song that we think would really have us like really break through, they dropped us, and that was that.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this. This question was put to me once on tour in the UK. I did weird metally industrial experimental music with my ex, and we were a weird crazy two-piece, right? And we performed in Bath, little club in Bath, and this person that came up to us and said, "What's it like to be first? And I thought they meant first playing. I was like, oh, it's kind of sucks to open up sometimes, but whatever. This place was kind of packed. They went, no. We've never heard this kind of music here. This is the first time we've ever heard this. We love it. And my inspiration was the artist actually from that region, Portishead, Massive Attack. That was my show. I wanted to make a heavier version of that. Like you said, you wanted to make heavier Alice in Chains. I wanted to make heavier that. We both didn't do it, but we did something else, right? And I always tell people it can suck to be first because there's no one really knows how to market you, number one, and no one really knows what to do with you. And going back and listening to Vanity a little bit before we were on air today, I've been up relatively early.
Sorry.
No, it's all good.
My phone's gonna die.
Oh no, it happens.
Yeah.
I was thinking, because I got to know the guys in bands like Under Oath over the years, and some of those groups that actually did get a certain amount of quote unquote mainstream success, playing again non-traditional, non-verse chorus music, even though they did have some big hooks. I mean, a lot of that song, you know, the riffs aren't staying the same, drum patterns are super syncopated. You know, pop music is real simple. Do you think, had you guys came out, you know, had the Marty McFly time machine happen for you guys 5 years later, then maybe things would have been different? Or do you guys not even have those conversations at this point?
I mean, we don't have those conversations, but I mean, a million times. And yeah, I know I'm different for the band, you know, even if it was like maybe 2 years later, 3 years later. I just, and to a lot of it goes to like mismanaged, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And there was like a shift at Epic, right? So we had signed this record deal. Mm-hmm. They had upstreamed us with Obsession. Had like their staff working on Obsession a little bit. Towards the end there of the label, like either left or got fired. And so our manager who got us the deal had moved a different realm in the industry. And so with one of his partners, or, you know, a guy who's management, and he had this, so he gave him Lamb of God, and he gave him Us, maybe Every Time I Die, I think. Oh, wow. I'm not sure. And difference. So our manager was like a few years older than us, and he was like we connected with him. And this other guy was much older. He was old school, managed like big rock bands. I think Cinderella was one of them.
Oh, wow.
And so he's like, we didn't necessarily vibe with him. And he's like, hey, there's a release clause in your contract that says, you know, if there's a changing of personnel, we can leave. Well, he's like, I'm gonna take you to, I think it was Hollywood. Where you went, I think if I'm not
Hollywood mistaken. Records, the Disney company.
I think. Yeah, I want to take you there. I've got. I think he was managing Breaking Benjamin at the time too. Them at that label, and he's like, I've got them over there. Like, they're gonna do us a solid. Like, it's a band, and we talked to our A&R guy who was an old hardcore back in the day, and we loved him. We just really connected with the A&R guy, staff, some of the staff at Epic, and then I had spoken to another manager, and I was like, hey, you know, I just want to get your take on this? Like, what do you think? And he's like, yeah, I wouldn't leave. And we're like, okay. And like the rest of the band were like, hey, like yeah, this guy anymore. Like, let's go with this guy. And so we ended up firing our manager label. I think it was maybe a year later. Atreyu goes to Hollywood, signs this map, puts out, oh gosh, I can't remember the record, but it
Something
blew
about
up.
Curse something.
You know,
yeah.
I think it might have been after the Curse even. Got massive, and we're just like, like I said to myself, like, fuck, that could have been like we could be straight right now doing all the sick stuff, and like could have gone from here to here, and it didn't happen, and it is what it is. But yeah, those are just, you know, choices and decisions. So I think, you know, I think to the question, if it would have been 2-3 years later, 5 years later, would have been a different story for us.
I remember hanging out with some bands that got a little bit of notoriety in the early 2000s, and your guys' name came up as being kind of the purveyors of cool when it came to fashion. And I always found that interesting, because when you think of Orange County, me personally, there is a look, and you guys didn't necessarily have what I'm used to as the Orange County look, right? The flat billed hat, Vans, Dickie shorts, you know, socks pulled up to your knees. There's a look that cats wear in Orange County till they're 58.
Yeah. Yes. Well.
And when you guys, and kind of all the rest of those I think everybody kind of comes out of your camp in a way, right? The incestuous nature of local scenes. There is a bit of a look that comes out of that Orange County scene that inspires, you know, people on the other side of the country. But I find it interesting, because to me, I looked at that look as something like, it's almost like these guys are taking LA circa 1984 and putting a modern twist on it. I remember a friend of mine was in a band with a dude that would later form Black Veil Brides. And when they were in a band together, his whole thing was, if we all look like Nikki Sixx, that'll be the look. And he was like, that's the dumbest thing I ever fucking heard. Why the hell would we all? And, you know, a lot of records sold later, I guess dude was right. What was behind the look? I've read a few things. I don't know how true they are, because I did find it actually very interesting that you guys are putting your own look together, because I think a lot of people don't understand some big artists that you see actually have stylists that put all that together. You guys did not.
Number one, I had worked at Banana Republic. So, which is super, but we got clothes that were 50% discount. And to be honest, it was cheaper to buy clothes from there than it was at other places, because our discount was just so crazy. Right?
Okay.
We would wait for stuff to go on sale at like, you know, 20, and then get another 50% off of that. So bought whatever was cool and black pants, black sweaters, coats. I think a lot of our inspiration for look and style came from Unbroken, who always, like, those dudes always just looked pretty slick, man. They just, you know, there was, some of them looked like they were like 50s greasers, and other dudes, you know, like from like the 80s, like more like, kind of like Bauhaus scene. Just they had this like rad vibe about the way that they looked, and that down in San Diego in general, like, had just this cool look to them. They were like cutting their pants like super high and like, tapering, just like 6 inches of socks showing between the shoe. We got super into that. And then I think to like, I was in school for, to become a hairstylist. So, hair and like hair was always like a big focal point. I mean, it still is. Mm-hmm. It's what it's what I do today as a career. Too, because I was so involved in hair and seeing like, when you see like hair on like paper, right? Like in a magazine or something, the hair, there's like really cool like makeup done and clothing, and it's just like a total package of an image that like the artist wants to sing with, a stylist for clothing and a photographer. It's just all of it just create this like one like great image. And so I was just the way that a lot of that like looked and what I was seeing, and just kind of putting it into my own look and the way that I came across, and some of the photos that I see sometimes. Yeah, like man, complete ass. But yeah, just we want apart from the other bands that were playing with us, like you said, like flat brim hats and like shirts and oversized t-shirts. Mm-hmm. And I think when we were going out on tour and like people we wanted to look different than the other bands. And like I always kind of had an idea for bands that all sound the same and play the same, like one after another. They get up and like it's just, maybe it's a cover band, right? And we all play the same. We execute them the exact same, right? But like one band stands out because like what band is out of the four are people going to gravitate to, even though they all sound the exact same. It's got like an image to them, right? And like people want to gravitate to an image and like be a kid growing up in the 90s. I wore flannel sweaters and like ripped up jeans, and I wanted to like fit into like that vibe. And so I think that the same thing is still holds true for today. I want to gravitate towards like an image, and their artists are artists on them as like people and individuals, stylistically, politically sometimes. You kind of become like this, for people to look up to. Not that we were trying to brand ourselves as icons, but like that's how I love my favorite artists. And that dude wears hair like that. I'm gonna cut my hair. I'm gonna put PR in it. Like I'm gonna start wearing suits because that dude does, and he looks sick. And that looks. Yeah. And it's just kind of like kind of being a kid, figuring out who you are, and like just getting into different things and ideas, and like surfing through the wardrobe.
I watched some footage of you guys at, I think it's Furnace Fest in Alabama, and I took a look. I'm looking again. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, everybody's an adult now, because everybody's we fall into like, this is I'm gonna wear this t-shirt, I'm gonna wear these pants, and that's what I'm gonna do at this point. Which actually for me was rather refreshing. I would have been mildly sad had everybody tried to reenact 2002.
Sure. That's fair. That's fair.
Well, it's sad to see when you see the older nostalgia acts do it. The hair metal guys. I saw some footage of Poison, and I'm like, CC DeVille, that's not your hair. Just be bald, dude.
No, and when I was out with my other band, Burns broke up the first time. We were doing like all these like rock tours. In fact, like you just see like dudes in their mid-50s with like you know up and the hair and like the bullet like the bullet belt. It's just like, man, like if you just tone that down some, maybe like dial that down like 25%, like you would look way better, you know, because like they were just trying too hard, you know, at that age, trying to like, uphold and like maintain this look. It's like you're in your 50s, man. It's cool. Like you don't have to. You want to look great, but you don't need to try to look like you're 25 because you know.
That's important. You know, I worked a festival, oh God, 6 years ago called Desert Trip, where it was like the Stones, the Who, Bob Dylan, Roger Waters. I can't remember everybody that was there. It was only like 6 bands or 6 artists, 6 iconic artists, right? And there was something refreshing about the fact that those guys are just old, and they would make jokes about it constantly. Like Mick Jagger,
Sure.
the first night was just like, you know, everyone here is in their 70s.
Yeah.
Oh, Paul McCartney was there. Yeah, he was like, everyone here is we're all in our 70s, dude. Like this, like, you know, Geritol should sponsor this. I think he made some jokes along those lines. But I have to admit that watching the Who in their 70s, I was like, wow, whatever they're taking, it's working. You know, I worked another festival with Robert Plant. Different Robert Plant was with one of his groups, and he was doing some, I think he did maybe 1 or 2 Zeppelin songs, and I didn't even know. I was in the back and I didn't think it was him. I thought it was someone playing Zeppelin on the sound system. They're like, oh no, that's Robert Plant. Like, oh, he's still hitting those notes. Another person that kind of has aged somewhat gracefully. There's something to be said about some of those quote unquote classic rock bands that don't try too hard to hang on to whatever they think they were in their mid 20s, unlike the hair bands, which there's a lot of wigs and goatee dye and
yes.
Which and do you guys feel like you're on, I don't want to say a nostalgia circuit, but there seems to be a revival. You played Furnace Fest, and I know they were advertising as having a lot of these bands from the early 2000s. And recently there was something in Vegas. I don't know if it actually went off, where there was a show with a bunch of bands from the same era.
Oh yeah, When We Were Young festival, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't think that's happened yet.
Oh, okay.
I don't, unless maybe. Not sure. I don't know. I don't keep up with that one.
I feel you.
Gosh. Yeah, there's nostalgia for sure. Oh, I think we're still writing and putting out new music. So we want to be like right, but we also have an understanding that we have a back catalog that's like that, you know, fans want to hear, fans want these anniversary times, you know, and then the young kids that have, like, you know, that never got to see or experience age, and just when they you know found out about the band, they're getting to see it for the first time. I think for us it is what can we do to make that, but also still have people be interested in what we're doing that's current, and releasing new records and new songs, because we're very, very much of the band, because it's allows us to still be creative, which we love.
Now, I do want to ask about that, because I think creativity gets different as your career changes. Now you guys are at a point where you're making music for yourselves. You don't have to chase a trend. You don't have to chase sales. You don't have to chase relevance. What is it like today when you guys get together and either get together for a writing session or rehearsal? Because from the footage that I saw, that seems pretty recent. It looks, you guys look great. You guys sound great. Is there a bit of a weight that's lifted off of your shoulders when you can just make music without expectations?
100%, man. Absolutely. So going into this, like, we started writing the record, the 2017 record, without the intention of it actually being an Visions record. And at the time, and Ken was not able to be involved and commit to it because he just too much going on. We got like halfway through this record, or maybe more than halfway through, and I'm like, hey, doing here, like, what do you see this band as? Like, what's it called? And I was like, okay, so we want to play shows, right? All right.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing that there's 3 of us in the band that were in 18 Visions, we would probably play some. That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, this sounds like 18 Visions. So it's 3 of us from the band, and we're gonna play shows, and we're gonna cover 18 Visions. Music sounds like 18 Visions. The only people we're fooling are ourselves if we're not, because that's what it is. And so we went that route, and it was just kind of like, hey, well, if we're like, there's 0 expectations, like, we're doing this for ourselves, like, we're not going to go out and tour a bunch, we're going to make the music that we want to make, and like, and awesome, and to be honest with you, it's been pretty much been nothing but that. Yeah, we don't feel like we have to write certain songs. We don't feel like there's a we don't want to do. We don't have the pressure to go out and play like 250. It keeps things exciting. It keeps things fresh for us. Create, like, you know, we do everything in house now. So like we write our music. We do all of our own like merchandising. We put out, so we can do whatever we want and without limitations, which I think just makes it just like the purest form of art for us, which is great. Playing, there's a little bit more pressure on us because we want to sound amazing, good as possible. I mean, there's nothing worse than a band that gets up on stage and they just sound washed. And like, we absolutely didn't want that effort into the presentation of our lives and how we sound, because we want people walking away, dude, that's the best you've ever sounded, or that's the best I've ever seen you guys. Years ago, and it was awesome, but this is just on a whole nother level. And, you know, 20 years later, musicians, we're more mature as, you know, individuals. We kind of now, we're not trying to necessarily like appeal to, or, you know, trying to like gain this whole new fan base. You know, everything is, and then when we bring that live element, it's just, we want for ourselves to, we want to be, you know.
Yeah, no, I get it, and I saw it. Again, I'll put links in the description to the professionally shot live stuff. I mean, we don't need to get the camera phone stuff on there, but but no, it looks great. I talk about it on this show quite often, and you know, sadly, I don't get to do as many music talks like this. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. This is also somewhat cathartic for me as well. But there is something to be said about no longer having, you know, expectations and the freedom to do what you want to do. I think that's when people release their best stuff. To see, you know, to kind of juxtapose that and this is just my opinion, to see you guys, let's just write an album. F it, let's just write a song. If it sells, great. If not, who cares? And you think about our larger contemporaries, you know, bands like Metallica, and you think about something like Saint Anger, or even, you know, the last few records. It's, you know, these guys made these iconic albums in their youth, and they're stuck in a lot of people's minds as the 18 to 26-year-olds that made those 4 or 5 records for them that defined their youth. And it almost feels like, well, those dudes are still trying to make you guys happy, and their music suffers. What I've been hearing from people that that are around my age group that are going back, oh, let's make a record again. It's like, oh, this sounds awesome. These guys sound free. So
yeah,
that's where the creativity is coming from, in my opinion.
I feel bad for bands like that, man, that are just kind of to those, you know, those records, because they are so iconic, right? You don't ever want to like duplicate or like as like an artist, right? Like we talked about that earlier. You don't want to like keep putting out the same new, but God, for them it's so hard, because how do you keep, you know, but then keep that many millions of people happy as well? It's just got to be so much of a burden, you know.
Of course,
Yeah.
and all that we do, right? But I do want to ask this question in closing, because I did find this kind of interesting about your time, and I mean, you're still in the industry, but your early years in the industry. iTunes is newer, and then MySpace is new. So your band does kind of come to prominence in an era of the internet. It's an interesting era, because MTV is starting to stop play music. Terrestrial radio is kind of losing its sway to a certain extent. And there are a lot of young people that are getting music through MySpace and what was it, Pure Volume, all these sites from the early 2000s. But there is a ubiquity with music from the consumer end, where it's just everywhere, and generally it's for free. And me personally, as someone that used to, you know, go to the record store, and the word from the cat at the record store of what was dope was the important word on the street.
Sure.
Thumbing through album art was how I discovered so many bands.
Yeah.
How do you view two things: the internet and its relation to music today, and what do you think the post-COVID world is going to look like for younger touring bands?
Yeah, well, part of me is jealous of, you know, bands that like were coming up, you know, post MySpace, like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you know, with bigger streaming platforms. The accessibility is just there. Like, it's just extra marketing tools and get your band out there. Because like you, I can't how many records I bought just because the cover was it looked awesome, and then really cool or really bad. Usually it was really bad. But so I found my stuff much more organically, which I think also the bands that I grew up with just hold like a special place in my heart compared to or listen to, because I did find those bands organically. You know, I found them like on my own, burnt cassette, or you know, happened to, you know, be at a show, you know, just makes it more special. Or like with a band like Earth Crisis, right? Like you're a part of something going on, like that. There's just so much more weight to it. You know, but again, like it's just find music and get exposure as a band. Whereas today, and then as far as like, you know, it being free to a certain extent, like, I don't need to make a living off of it, so it doesn't affect me. What I do for myself with these bands and artists that I like and follow is that they play a show. If I'm there, I try to buy merch if I like it, the band, and they're putting out vinyl, I'll buy the pre-order. So I try to support bands that I do like, especially the underground bands, or like, you know, the indie label bands. I know how hard it was, you know, to living back then. I'm sure it's still just as hard. Expenses for everyone going up.
Can you imagine $6 a gallon gas back in the back in the band days?
No. And to answer your question about post-COVID touring, you know, we were just out doing dates, and thankfully haul some of our gear around for us, which was like really, 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 really awesome for us. A trailer, or you know, a bigger van or vessel for us to travel is easier for us, which I think at our age, with how limited we do things, it's pretty much just for fun for us.
Yeah.
And so if it's just for fun, we want and as comfortable as possible. Otherwise, when it starts to lose that more of like a job and more of a burden. So, you know, the fact that we've gotten so many different ways when we're on the road is awesome. But man, looking at those gas, it's rough. And I think as bands, smarter about how you tour, with expenses, and trying to scale down a little bit. If it is like your only source of income, gosh, I guess being maybe, you know, if you're one of those bands 24/7 and that's your job, like you just have to, I can maybe even put in, I don't know. It just seems difficult. It seems like people are buying tickets to shows, and the ticket count like outweighs, you know what I mean? Like, so it means like
say it again. It outweighs the what now? Say it again. Ticket count outweighs the what?
At the venue. So a lot of, which means a lot of people that are buying pre-sale tickets. So there's more tickets sold than there are actually bodies in the venue.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
People just aren't showing up.
Yeah. I think that is like very, very common. They get excited about it. They're like, oh, I'm going to buy tickets. And then like either something comes up, or reluctance or whatever, but maybe aren't as intent on going as they are in the moment of like actually buying the ticket. Really, really unfortunate, because, you know, that's potential merch sales for bands, and like the funner the show is in general. And yeah, it seems like it's on all levels.
That's scary. Well,
yeah,
James, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me today. We are over an hour. I don't want to take too much of your time. I know you're a busy man. You actually have to cut people's hair. I have no hair, so I'm jealous of you and all your clients. So
I've got some guys that are holding on to it, but you know,
my tall friends let me know real quick that my shit was getting thin on top. And when you got good friends, they'll tell you like, look, man, I can see your thoughts. Just shave that shit.
That's a good one, man.
Well, James, stick around for a second, because I do want to ask you a question off air. So thank you very much. Thank you guys for joining us for this inaugural trip into the PopLife show. I did get the name from the Prince song, and of course, too scared to play it because YouTube would have took it down. So enjoy me playing music and my love of all things cyberpunk.